Okay, so it's National MS Awareness Week, and trying to decide what I wanted to do for that, I decided that over the course of this week I would make a series of videos because I think that one of the most important things that as someone with MS I can do is to kind of put a face on that, and nothing does that better than video, where you can see someone moving and talking and pretty much being normal the way you can be. My name is Melissa, and I was diagnosed 11 years ago this month. I was just turned 30, and I was getting married in 2 months. And one day I was driving to work, and I noticed that the end of my left thumb was really numb. It felt like there was a rubber band around it. And throughout the course of that day, I started having more widespread left-sided numbness. And I was really fortunate in that it only took about 48 hours to get a definitive diagnosis. I happened to be in a situation where my GP was fresh out of med school and in an internal medicine practice, and was sort of happy, eager, and excited to have a patient that was more than colds and flu, and was interested. And then also my then fiance was getting ready to leave for med school, and at the time was working in a local hospital and had some very tight friendships, close friendships with people in, radiologists and neurologists in the hospital, and really just sort of ran through all of the steps of diagnosis very quickly, so much so that it kind of made my head spin at the time. But a lot of MS patients end up getting this sort of long, drug-out diagnosis that they try to make it everything else first, which is, I think, unfortunate, because it makes it seem like, MS is this sentence that you're going to have to live with, and they don't want to label you that way. And there's really nothing that horrible or terrible about knowing exactly what's wrong with you, and that's really what I felt like. I just needed to know exactly what was wrong with me. I remember the first time someone said MS to me, I was on the phone with my fiance, and he was calling me from work, and he was saying, this is what they're starting to think about. And I'm a computer person, and I put my hands on the keyboard and pulled up a search engine, and Yahoo'd at the time MS, and an awareness site came up, and I clicked on a link, and I remember there was this big heading that said recently diagnosed, and had a question mark, and right under that there was a sentence that said, this isn't going to kill you, you're okay. And that just really stuck with me from that moment forward. That's sort of been my mantra. I was calm from that second on, and have been ever since. I remember another reality check with this whole thing was that in this particular hospital, it was a big cancer center, and the steroid treatment that I received was given in the infusion center, in the same place that the chemo patients would go to get their chemotherapy. And it was this lovely kind of luxurious place. They tried to make it as nice of a experience as you can possibly have getting chemo, but you're in these big barca loungers, and you have this IV set up next to you, and I look to my left and to my right, and there are people who have cancer, and they're getting chemo, and their hair is falling out, and they look sick. And here I am, and I'm a basically healthy 30-year-old woman who is getting married and excited. I'm reading bridal magazines, and it was just such a reality check to say that this is something that, to be dealt with and to take into the course of everyday life and just live with it, and go forward and know that it's not as bad as, something else that could be dealt to you. So that's really how I've lived with it for 11 years. I have 2 beautiful daughters, and I had 2 delightful, wonderful pregnancies. I remember that when I was first diagnosed, my first neurologist made a quirky, odd statement to me, the way neurologists will. He said, there's never been a better time to have MS. And while that sounds like a very strange statement, what he really meant was that there's been so much advancement in the drug therapies and trials and the possibilities for a cure, or definitely for manageability. And he was right. It was the late 90s. The interferons were now, kind of out there and in full steam. I chose Avonex. Took it for years. I take a different medication now, but that's only because it works in conjunction with some other medications that I have. But it's been a very manageable situation. This is what MS looks like for some people, for most people probably with MS. One of the most surprising things to me out of the whole thing has been how it just sort of comes out of the woodwork. You start telling people you have MS and somebody's mother has it, or their aunt or their sister or a relative or their neighbor, and everyone knows someone, but you don't talk about it unless you have a reason to bring it up. So there's a lot of us out there, and unless someone has brought it up, you may not know that 2% of the people or have someone who's within 1 or 2 degrees of someone who has MS, and it's everywhere. And so it's important that people understand it and know about it. So this week I'm going to blog about MS and what it looks like, and the first thing to know is that it looks like me.